morning, and thank you for joining me for today's midweek reflection. Last Sunday, we had in Holy Saviour Church our harvest service, and it was a lovely occasion. And I dare say that that's something that resonates with lots and lots of people. I think Harvest Festival is sort of quite deeply ingrained in our culture. Lots of people who perhaps don't consider themselves necessarily all that religious would nonetheless take themselves to a harvest service in church. It's something that sort of rings true to them. I think that probably most schools, even if they're not church schools or faith-based schools, I imagine most schools around about this time of year would probably have something a bit like this that marks this moment in the seasons. I must admit, when I was a child, I thought Harvest Festival was sort of quite nice, but it wasn't something that particularly resonated with me. As a townie, I didn't really have a very strong sense of the land and the way in which food was grown and sourced and the labour of those who produced it. I remember when I was a curate, the vicar of the parish there on Harvest Festival service one year, talking to a group of children, and he asked the question, "Where do apples come from?" A little boy put his hand up and said, "They come from Asda." In the news at the moment, there's quite a lot of stuff about how between now and Christmas we may begin to see quite a lot of shortages of particular foods. It strikes me that our generation have for years and years more or less taken it for granted that food was something that was just readily available, was cheap, and that we could find more or less whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, any time of the year. Of course, people in the developing world, I think, have understood for a long time that actually food was something you shouldn't and couldn't take for granted. In just a few weeks from now, the leaders of all of the most wealthy and powerful nations in the world are gathering in Glasgow for the COP21 summit. Now, there have been lots of such summits over the last sort of 30 years or so, but I think there's a realization now that things are getting to a quite critical stage. And if we, all of us, fail to act over perhaps the next 10 years or so, then we may begin to get to a point where the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere are so high that we're actually going beyond a kind of tipping point, and maybe the whole future of our planet could really be in question. I read a few days ago some really alarming statistics that over the last half century, about a quarter of the world's ecosystems have completely collapsed. And here in Britain, it's even worse. It's something like 50% of the ecosystems that we would have had 50 years or so ago. That really matters because we're talking about all that sustains you and me and life on Earth, everything. So I think today I'd like to encourage you to do 3 very small things. The first is, as the name Harvest Thanksgiving suggests, the first is just to have a moment of thankfulness. Give thanks for the air that you breathe. Give thanks maybe for the main meal that you have with family or friends today. Give thanks for your place in this world that sustains you. And the second is to reflect on your place on this planet. And this may be something you do a lot already, but to think, are there little ways, and perhaps even big ways, in which you might be able to tread a little bit more lightly on this earth. And the third thing is to think, are there any perhaps fairly non-scary ways in which you might be able to encourage others to think about doing the same? I'd like to read you a poem which I think puts into words a lot of what I'm trying to convey to you, and it's called Creative Carelessness by Marjorie Dobson. And afterwards we shall have the hymn, Come, Ye Thankful People, Come. Creative carelessness. They cannot take away your sky, Lord, though they try, with their toxic gas emissions and their CFC pollutions and their smog-creating smoke clouds. It's still there, blue and black, in day and night time, sun and moon and stars that glisten, clouds that glow and glower and rumble, sunset flare and sunrise glory, ever changing yet eternal. Yours, Lord. How dare we ignore it, as if nothing we could do will permanently harm it. Make us aware of our responsibilities. They cannot take away your earth, Lord, or its worth, with their underground nuclear testing and their careless deforestation. It's still there, rainbow-coloured, plants and animals, trees and fruit and birds and fishes, grass and grain and sparkling water, land and sea and soaring mountain. Your provisions for your children. Yours, Lord. How dare we misuse it, as if we need do nothing to protect it. Make us aware of our stewardship. Please, Lord, before it's too late.